Identifying as a woman is a thing that only a man can do. Wanting to be a woman is a thing that only a man can do. Only men can be trans women. But it took me a year to work out that I didn't just think it was weird, that I thought it was dangerous. It's genuinely regressive. It's sexist bullshit. And I mean, this is completely absurd. Holy God, you say what? You know, the lesbians are bigoted for saying that people with penises can't be lesbians, you know? Clownfish can change sex. They genuinely can change sex. But we're not clownfish. You do a bloody little hand.
Yeah. Would you know that these are male? If I just cut off the hair here, would you know these are male?
Yeah, look at the size of your palm. But now, because of the work I do think about the differences between the sexes, and they are big. And they are baked through. They're in every bit of us. They're in every cell.
What kind of thing? How did it all come to this, Helen?
Which bit? Me being like a genocidal maniac, or sex and gender, like that, you know, we all pretend we don't know there are two sexes?
Let's do the latter, then we'll do the former.
All right. How did we end up getting to the point that we pretend there aren't two sexes? God, I mean, I had to write an entire book to answer that question, really. But like Perfect Storm, I mean, I don't think we can ignore the fact that there are some men whose dearest wish is to be a woman.
Yes.
And those men put all their effort into it, and have done really for a century, since doctors first said that they could offer sex change. There's no such thing as a sex change. You can't change sex. No. But surgeries to make it look like you've changed sex a bit. So those men, I think, really, you know, for a century have been pushing. But then you look at the impact of what was happening on campus with queer theory. You look at identity politics. You look at the progress narrative, which always needs a new battle to fight. So, you know, women's liberation, black liberation, gay liberation. What's next? So when you got to gay marriage, you needed another one. Mm-hmm. And all these things came to a point, and probably 2015 was the tipping point, that suddenly the most important thing in the world, if you cared about social justice, was that you pretended there weren't two sexes. Or at the very least, you accepted that there were two sexes, but you pretended that people could change. And so that is now, it's heresy to say that you can't, but it's also true. So, you know, then you get into this state where people have to be super hysterical about everything to try to stop you from saying it, which is why they throw around, to answer the first bit of your question, words like genocidal and bizarrely anti-Semitic. If you say people can't change sex, and a man who identifies as a woman remains a man who identifies as a woman, not a woman.
Do you think it's part of a fallacy that social progress there's always an upwards curve, that we're always getting closer and closer to utopian social culture?
Oh, completely. I mean, it's a very powerful myth. What's the famous saying? I always misquote this. The arc of justice bends towards...
Yes.
You know the one I mean. I mean, I should learn that quote off by heart, because I butcher it every time I try to do it. But anyway, this sort of like that, you know, progress is slow but inevitable. Mm-hmm. Like, why do we think that? Entire cultures have risen and fallen and risen and fallen. That could happen to us too. And also it means that you can kind of retrofit what's happening and say that it's what should be happening. I think that's something like the naturalistic fallacy. So the naturalistic fallacy is, this is natural, therefore it's good. So we could call this the progress fallacy. If this is the direction that things are going, that's good. So somebody asked me, like, am I worried about being on the wrong side of history once? And I said, like, imagine it's 2050 and I'm still here, and everybody in the world except me thinks it's all right to put a rapist in a women's jail if that man says he's a woman. I'm still right and they're wrong. Because that is a wrong thing to do. It is morally, you know, absolutely contemptible. So I'm not worried about the judgment of history or the right side of history or anything like that. I'm deciding now what I know to be right on the basis of everybody's human rights and everybody's dignity.
Did you see this coming as a mathematician, that you would be the person to speak to about trans rights and gender critics?
No, it's the most bizarre, plot twist, you know. I was happily at The Economist doing one job after another. I started there in 2005 as the education correspondent, having previously had a sort of former life as an academic, as you mentioned. I have a PhD in mathematics. And then I went from mathematics into public understanding of mathematics, and then arrived at The Economist via the Royal Statistical Society. So I did the education piece, I went out to Brazil, and then I came back to London in 2014 and spent nearly a decade doing editing jobs. And during one of those editing jobs, the editor-in-chief of the paper mentioned to me that her kids kept coming home and saying, such and such is trans now. And she said, what's that about? And I was like, all I'd ever heard about was the occasional mention of a transsexual or a sex change operation. I knew nothing about it. So I just said to her, I'll look into it for you. And I looked into it and thought it was a bit crazy, really quite crazy, like that people were already saying by then, this was like 2017, that, sex and gender were intertwined categories that were socially constructed rather than having a bedrock of biological reality in them, entirely socially constructed, like. And that, a man who identified as a woman who was attracted to women could be a lesbian, and, that it was bigoted to think, and actually anti-feminist to think, that the category of woman was defined by the type of body you had. So, this is all really, really weird. But it took me a year to work out that I didn't just think it was weird, that I thought it was dangerous. And a lot of people who go through this path, like most of the people I talk to these days, they always say at some point I went down the rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. Like the bit where you're going, like you're seeing it out of the corner of your eye and you're going, that's weird. That's really weird.
Peaked. Graham Linehan said, are you peaked now? And I was like, I don't know. He said, no, I thought it's like
the
weird
bit where you go, holy God, you say what? That lesbians are bigoted for saying that people with penises can't be lesbians, The problem with peaked for me, when Graham explained that to me, is it does sound remarkably similar to all sorts of conspiracy theories. Like I was red-pilled, I was this, I was that about, and actually theories I can't even say on YouTube, but about pizzas and things in America. And now suddenly everything came together. So how do we know that maybe we are the bigots? No, I'm on your side on this, but what if we are the bigots here? Because bigots don't think they're bigots. Oh, completely. Bigots don't think they're bigots. People who are wrong don't think they're wrong. Most people in this, on any side of the argument, are not trying to do harm. They think they're doing the right thing. But I mean, that's just true all across. That's true right across the piece. So you can't outsource your moral judgments. You can't say, this is formally in structure like something else that's wrong, therefore it's wrong.
Sure.
And you can't say, oh, well, the Democrats believe this and Trump's believe that, and the Democrats are good and Trump is bad, and therefore I can come to a moral judgment. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to use some shorthands. Like, we can't, all of us, all the time, think about absolutely everything. I mean, the example I often give is, I couldn't possibly explain the carbon cycle to somebody with any great depth. So, I have to take some things about global warming on faith.
Yes.
Or if I know about global warming, that's taken so much time that I have to take something else on faith, like vaccines or something.
Flat Earth.
The Flat Earth, I'm really pretty sure that I have.
You're a mathematician.
Yeah.
Because I've done that. I've dueled with Flat Earthers, and I've always had to concede that I think they have more faith than I do in something, but I have an element of faith because I can't, even though everyone tells me it's relatively simple, but I'm too lazy. I don't know. I can't prove that the Earth is spherical. I have faith that it is.
Yeah, if I had to sit down with a Flat Earther, I'd have to prepare for half an hour first. But that wouldn't be because I think it's hard or that it would take me a long time to learn it. I mean, if I had to sit down and talk to an anti-vaxxer, I'd have to do a lot more. But also, and you see, this is the thing, is like, I feel very much more like the person on the vaccine side and on the, the round earth side, because I've had to go through what people who battle flat earthers and battle anti-vaxxers have to do, which is to learn the strange sort of twisted melange type ideas that they have that stitch together things that look superficially plausible, to fool you. So, I remember in an editorial meeting, the first time I heard somebody say, 2.7% of people are intersex, as many as have red hair. Yeah. That's just one of those talking point things. And I was completely boggled. I was like, what? I've literally never met somebody who can't be categorized as male or female. Yeah. So what's your point? And now I know where that figure comes from. I know what the misrepresentation is. I know how to rebut it in a short form.
Well, let's start there.
All right. Okay. So if you include people who have polycystic ovaries or a particular, what can be very small deformity of the genitals when they're born, which is that the opening to the penis isn't quite on the end, it could be along the side somewhere, then you can get to 2.7% if you try really hard for people who have some sort of, kind of difference of sex development or disorder of sex development. Within that, about 1,000th of those people have something that you could seriously say this person has elements of the development of both sexes. But even then, that doesn't mean there's a third sex. It doesn't mean that those people are really intersex, is what it sounds like, is that they're between the sexes. They're one sex or the other, but there's something that happened that pushed their body to try to develop down the other pathway. And, these are very serious disorders, actually, those ones. They can be fatal. They can cause infertility or sterility, really. And they often need you to have diagnosis early in life so that you can have treatment. Like they can have odd impacts, like very low blood salt that's dangerous, and you wouldn't think that had something to do with a disorder of sex development. Now I know that. And anyway, this 2.7% of people have red hair. Where? It's loads more than that in Ireland, and it's pretty much none in Somalia. So like, what? What's your point? It's just somebody came up with that as a talking point, and it spread. And it's got like the hockey stick in, anti-climate change rhetoric. It's got that status, and there's about a dozen of those, or maybe 20 of those, and they really derail you until you know where they come from and how to rebut them. So I feel like I'm on the side of the person who's doing the scientific thing, whereas the people who are arguing that sex is a spectrum, or that, trans women are women, full stop, no debate, like really wholly and completely women, the same as every other woman, like they're kind of the equivalent of the anti-vax or COVID conspiracist or whatever. They're the ones who are stitching together bizarre and shifting.
Well, if proof of that is when I spoke to Richard Dawkins, and he spoke about this, and he said it's lunacy and whatever. And the amount of comments, angry comments, saying, "Oh, what a shame that Dawkins has gone this way. I wish he knew what I knew," that kind of thing. And it's like, but you're like, Cheeky Monkey 69, and he's the world's most famous evolutionary biologist, right? Yeah. And they somehow believe strongly enough that he's just too old or something now, that he missed out.
They've just, it's just retrofitting your arguments to your beliefs. Because the thing is, Richard Dawkins could be wrong, and there are people who are, not very many it has to be said, but there are people who are senior scientists or credentialed scientists. There's a chap called P.Z. Myers, who used to run, or still does possibly run, a skeptics blog. And he describes himself as an evolutionary biologist, and I think he genuinely is. And he's totally on the, if you say there are two sexes and you say people can't change sex, you're like a flat earther, and you're a Trumpite, and you're an anti-Semite, and all of that stuff. So, I also have talked to Richard Dawkins about this, and he is an intellectual hero of mine, and it was a genuine fangirl moment for me.
It's scary talking to him, though, isn't it? Or not for you?
Oh, well, you may notice I can talk quite a lot and quite fast.
I was scared. I was frightened talking to him, and because he gives very short answers as well.
Well, he was interviewing me.
Oh.
So.
Okay, I like that. Well, and the other thing about intersex, so firstly, as you say, the statistics are just not right at all.
No.
And secondly, I am really trying. I don't see the relevance. I don't see how, some people are born intersex, therefore, if men who are not intersex believe they are women, therefore, I guess I'm trying to strongman. So the idea is it means gender's all on a spectrum because there are intersex people. That is a mad leap.
It's completely mad. But and it's also like, how could somebody be intersex? Like, I hate that word intersex. It's not a good word. It's a deprecated word now. Like, it suggests like that you are some interspecies, non-fully human type of person. If you have one of these conditions, they're serious conditions. Yeah. Like, either you've been diagnosed with it as a baby and it has shaped your early life, or there's a few that you only find out about when you hit puberty. Like, imagine you discover in puberty that you thought you were a totally ordinary female, and actually what you are is you're XY, so you're male, but you lack the capacity to metabolize and use testosterone correctly, so your body turns it into estrogen, and you're going to develop along female lines, but you do not have a uterus, you do not have ovaries, you're never going to have a period, you're certainly obviously not going to get pregnant. Like, that's devastating.
Yeah.
And to call that person intersex, like, it's a person who has a difference or disorder of sex development. It's a serious condition. And you're being used then by like Sam Smith and all the non-binary as part of some mad idea. And you'll be like, Lee, have you read the book Middlesex? Do you ever read that? I haven't read it. I know the book. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and it doesn't sort of take a side in these things. It is just about an intersex child who grows up, and it's fantastic. Okay, I might look that one up then. Yeah. So I mean, why do they do it? Like it's like the Gish Gallop, which is the like if I understand correctly. I mean, I never watched any of these, but Gish was like an anti-evolution debater, like a creationist, and his technique was to talk extremely fast with, plausible sounding, sometimes true, sometimes false, mostly irrelevant facts and factoids that overwhelm any debater. And if you're trying to debate him, and even if you're able to answer all of them, like he could throw out 10 things and it's going to take you 10 minutes to debunk any one of them, and the audience can't follow. So I think they just go like intersex. And you're like, oh God, look how long we've been talking about intersex.
Yeah.
And it's not relevant, as you say. Like, it doesn't mean that a man who has not got one of these conditions can somehow magically become a woman.
It's almost proof that they're not, that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I got sidetracked onto the don't call them intersex thing. But I mean, actually, like, if there was such a thing as intersex, you would need to know what the two sexes were before you could say someone was neither of them.
Or otherwise inter would mean nothing.
Yeah. Or then they go clownfish. They love clownfish. Clownfish can change sex. They genuinely can change sex. But we're not clownfish.
Yeah. Further evidence, we're very clearly not clownfish.
Yeah,
so
and also, I mean, how do we know that clownfish can change sex? Because we know what the sexes are. Like, you couldn't say...
They change what? And then, sex, that's the thing.
I know. And I mean, the no debate thing on this area is one of the reasons they use such silly arguments, because some of them really can be debunked in one sentence, like the clownfish one. We are not clownfish.
Done.
And how do you know they've changed sex?
Done.
Yeah. And so... if you say that to somebody who brings it up, like the face drops because they've never heard anyone argue with it, because there's no debate.
It's like Matt Walsh when and I don't agree with a lot of Matt Walsh's politics, but when he went around going, "What is a woman?"
I know.
What an amazing question.
Did you watch that film?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember the chicken? They do chickens cry.
Do chickens cry? No, what was that?
Her name, she's a doctor. I think it's Michelle Forcier. And she went off on this absolutely insane ramble. I can't remember why. Obviously he asked her what is a woman, but she was all kind of wishy-washy and weird about it. And then she said, do chickens cry? Anyway, she's being sued by some detransitioners. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. It comes back to haunt them. I was thinking specifically with regards to you as a mathematician, why this bothers you. And I happened to recently read... do you ever read Ted Chiang? Ted Chiang's a short story writer, and he's fantastic.
Listen, I read nothing except factual things about sex and gender now. I've not read for pleasure for bloody years, except for J.K. Rowling, because I make an exception there.
I was doing that because of the podcast. You have to always read non-fiction because you've got to be... And then I thought, you know what? I'm done. And I'm going to go back to fiction.
I need to.
You need it's a happier life. Or maybe it's a more miserable life. Ted Chiang is great. He wrote the short story that Arrival was based on. There's a movie about language and aliens.
Oh yeah, I watched that, yeah.
Yeah, so he's always about like mathematical and science and language and how it interacts with fiction. And he wrote one called Division by Zero. And it's a short story. And it's about a woman mathematician who accidentally proves that maths or arithmetic is inconsistent. She accidentally proves that 1 does not necessarily actually equal 1, and she goes insane and tries to kill herself.
Oh, I must read this one.
Yeah, it's very. It must be up your street.
Yeah.
And I wondered if this is a similar thing. Trans women are women. When you hear that, it's almost like hearing 1 equals 2.
I mean, it's a thought-stopping cliche is the specific thing it is, and in the phrase of Robert Lifton, who wrote about thought control in China, in communist China. And he came up with this expression that a thought-stopping or a thought-terminating cliche was a short, highly reductive phrase that was the beginning and end of every conversation. Yeah. That's not quite the right wording, but anyway. So the point is that when it pops into your head, a thought, inconvenient thoughts pop into your head, like, well, if trans women are women, obviously trans women are allowed into women's sports. But like, is that fair? Because they've been through male development. So they're going to be stronger because that's what testosterone does. And if that thought comes into your head, you need to be able to loop back and just say trans women are women, full stop. Because otherwise you'll find yourself in the very inconvenient place of realising that this is not fair.
Yeah.
And then you've got to bounce back and think, well, that means they're not really women, at least for the purposes of sport. And then you think, well, what about sex crimes? What about prisons? What about, whatever? And then suddenly you're down the rabbit hole and you too are a heretic and you're cast out. So it is specifically, that's how trans women or women functions. It's not really meant to be a truth as such. It's meant to be like a mystery. It makes you feel clever. It makes you feel like you're part of the in crowd. It's a bit like saying, the Trinity are 3 in 1, or, the body and blood of Jesus Christ our Lord, the bread and the wine, turn into them in some real, genuine sense, but they still look like bread and wine. So it's that kind of mystery thing. But in the last few years, because laws don't function like mysteries and thought-stopping cliches, they function like mathematical statements, this mystery has been turned into a really flat piece of paper that says, male and female are both mixed sex categories. Mm-hmm. And that is like saying 1 equals 0. And it breaks everything, it turns out. it turns out that when you absolutely flatly lie about something that is fundamentally, an immutable core fact of what it is to be a human, and you lie about that in the laws about humans, that you break an awful lot of stuff. You break a lot of institutions. You break specifically education for kids, because you've got to lie to them about something really central themselves as they're growing up. You break the accommodations for women in public life. What else? I mean, you break statistics. Like, we've just gone through a census in this country. Well, it's a couple of years ago, but it's just relatively recently been analysed. And, the ONS, Office for National Statistics, tried to have self-ID in effect for the answer to whether you're male or female. This is in the thing that costs £1 billion and is used to plan for the next 10 years for demographics, for where you put schools, for where you put doctor surgeries, for how many people there are going to be, transport, everything. And I mean, that actually really does depend on knowing which sex people are, because that's how we make babies. And the ONS was all like, well, who cares whether people tell the truth? Like, it broke the central point of the ONS. And it turned out that happened in a lot of places. I keep finding new ones.
I do think it's scary. I mean, for everyone that's talking out about this, I think has a different point where they're like, okay, no. One friend of mine was a lawyer who was saying, like, well, legally, what are we going to do with this issue? One friend had just had a child and was saying, hang on, I don't want my kid being taught this educationally.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a linguist. So for me, it was just an assault on language. And then everyone says, oh, but language is always changing. Is it? Yeah, but not to mean things that aren't true.
Yeah, and not by force either.
Yeah, no.
I mean, there's this very irritating phenomenon if you talk and write on this and you're contactable, which I am, both because of having a website with my email address on it, but also because I work for this campaign group, Sex Matters, so they contact us. And really with some regularity, and I really don't want to slag off men generally, so let me go hashtag not all men, but it is 100% men who do this one.
Yeah.
They message and they say, I don't think that you have understood that, sex is real, that's male and female, but man and woman are social roles. They are genders.
The arrogance.
And you're like, oh, I wasted the last 5 years of my life trying to think about this. And you're like, well, what is the social role then?
Yeah.
Like, was I playing the female social role when I got a PhD in mathematics? Presumably not. If you were to stay home and look after your child when you have a child, are you playing the female social role? Does it turn me into a man and you into a woman? If it does, then isn't that massively sexist? Like, what is there that I could do in my life as a social role that would constitute living as a man?
I don't even
It's
such a conservative point that you would do these things and they make you, that's what makes you a man.
It's regressive. I don't even like to say conservative, because there's nothing wrong with being conservative if what you're doing is conserving good stuff.
But I'm trying to insult people who consider themselves progressive, so that's why I say
so I say regressive.
Regressive.
Yeah, it's genuinely regressive. It's sexist bullshit, and it's regressive. So. But more than that, like, literally anything that I do, anything at all, is a thing that a woman does because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
So there's literally nothing I could do that is living as a man. I can't do it. You can't live as a woman because you're a man. No, there's nothing. There's nothing. I can't do it. Anything I can do is a thing that a woman does. Identifying as a woman is a thing that only a man can do. Wanting to be a woman is a thing that only a man can do. Yeah. Only men can be trans women.
I'd like to be a woman and I've said this a few times, for like a few days, because you only get you live once, don't you? And I'd love to. And then I always think, and I had this discussion with Coleman Hughes, and I was trying to push him on it. And he was like a bit sheepish about it. And I was saying, but come on, like you got one life. Wouldn't you have a few days? It wouldn't have to be those few days of the month. You'd have a good, really good time.
Yeah. No, I can totally see that. But it's really interesting that absolutely everybody listening knows just what you mean.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, there is no you that's a woman. It's not possible for you to be a woman for a few days. But we do this in science fiction, or even just in fiction, all the time. Like, we have this idea, we could be ghosts after death, or you could, do body swap, like in the film Big, or whatever. But none of that makes any sense, because we are our bodies. And I'm not trying to make a superficial point here. I think it's a deep point. I didn't spend most of my time thinking about the fact that I'm female. Like, I had the babies, so I was the one who was pregnant for 9 months for my 2 children. On occasion I've experienced sexism, especially because I studied mathematics, and, there were some issues sometimes, not often. So, and, you think about rape in a different way, obviously, as a woman going home at night. But, most of my life I wasn't thinking I'm living as a woman. I did a job that actually both sexes do in fairly equal numbers, namely journalism. The Economist has more men than women, but like, fine. It was completely fine. So I didn't think about being a woman most of the time. But now, because of the work I do think about the differences between the sexes, and they are big, and they are baked through. They're in every bit of us. They're in every cell.
What kind of thing?
Oh, God. Like, I mean, if you just look at your hand, you have a man's hand.
Well, you've chosen the wrong person, because despite my height, which is tall, I have these little hands.
Yeah, but I mean, I have brothers who have little hands. You do have bloody little hands.
Yeah. Would you know that these are male? If I just cut off the hair here, would you know these are male?
Yeah, look at the size of your palm. But look at the size of your palm.
I've got quite pretty nails, though. Look.
Yeah, you've got short fingers for somebody who... Yes, your hands are small because your fingers are short. Your palm isn't small.
Oh, is the palm big then?
Yeah, palm is normal size. You've just got little fingers.
Little sausages.
You've got little fingers, yeah. Like my sons have quite small hands for men, but they have beautiful long fingers. So
yeah,
they've lovely hands.
I wish. But
it is in everything. So your hands are much stronger than a woman's would be. One of the biggest sex differences is in hand strength.
Oh, so even if you and I have the same... We might have the same... Can I just say you don't have to actually touch me if you don't?
It's all right.
Mine are slightly bigger.
God, you really have got tiny hands.
Tiny hands, but mine would be significantly
much stronger. Your wrists will be stronger. You've got better bone density. You've got tighter tendons. You've got what else? Your muscles aren't just stronger; they've got more fast twitch fiber. They've got a different constitution to them. Like there are many reasons why men run faster than women, right? And it's not just that men are bigger and stronger; it's that their tendons are tighter, so that they store more power and they rebound faster. Wow. Your hips. The way that your pelvis works is very different, and it puts force through better. There's just there are so many things. Your skull is stronger. Your eyes are deeper set. Your jaw. It's not just that it's a stronger jaw. It's harder to break your jaw. Your punching power. That's another of the very, very big differences, because to punch you use your chest, your shoulders, your back, your arms, your hand, your fist, all of them. So it compounds a lot of differences, all of which are quite large. So, there's just these big differences, and they're just the physiological ones as well. Like women and men's psyches are different, in part because of a lifetime, one sex being the raped sex and the other sex being the raping sex. And I'm not saying all men are rapists. People really get this wrong.
It's mad, isn't it? The longer you do this, you're now
keeping doing rebuttals in your head. I know, it's mad.
I know. And then people sometimes go, "Can you stop explaining yourself? I just want to listen to you." That's what they go. And I'm like, I was doing that, but everyone else go. And then the people who are really successful, though, they just go.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's not saying sorry for himself, is he?
No. But so I went on this sort of big detour to say, being male or female is in everything. There are psychological differences. That is hardly surprising. Evolution is a very powerful force. One sex gets pregnant for 9 months and breastfeeds, the other one doesn't. Obviously, that's going to cause psychological differences because evolution works that way. Anyway, so it's baked right through you, what sex you are. And I can't even remember why we were talking about that. But it's, so there isn't a you that's a woman. There just isn't.
But the me in my head is me with breasts and a vagina.
Which is a very male way to think about being a woman.
That's all I'm interested in.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's the old male joke of God, I love to have tits because I play with them all day. Could never get anything done.
In this vision, I'm attracted to myself.
Yeah. And that is the reason that some men identify as women.
That is a thing, isn't it?
That is a real
thing. That's offensive, but it's a thing.
I don't think like that, obviously, because I actually am a woman. I don't sit here thinking, God, I really can't work because, whoa, I've got tits and a vagina, Hang
on, when you came in, you...
But you see what I mean? There isn't a you that's a woman. But it feels like a very natural thing to say, I'd love to be a woman for a few days. What woman? There is no woman that you can be.
To an extent, there is this, when you're born, is it true you don't have a thing yet, a gender, sex, whatever? Is that before you're born? Sorry.
That's a myth.
Something to do with nipples.
That's another bloody myth. So there's this thing everybody's conceived female. That's the idea. That's the thing that people say. Yeah, that's a myth.
Wow.
How can it be true? I mean, it's your chromosomes that make you male or female, and you've got your chromosomes from conception. What they're actually saying is that we don't go through sex differentiation for some weeks. And there's this bizarre, incredibly baked in sexism that to be a man is to actively have something, and when you're null or negative or lacking, that's female. So in the weeks before there's any that you could see from the fetus whether it was male or female, they say that's female. Well, why? I mean, half of them are male, so it's male as well as female. It's like this thing. Sorry, I'm really jumping all over the place. Why do girls who identify as non-binary cut off their breasts? like not having breasts is male and having breasts is female. So why is not having breasts non-binary? Oh, they do. Yeah.
Non-binary. That's the one that...
Like not all the time, but it is like, it's really like non-binary girls cut their hair short, bind their breasts or have a mastectomy. And you're like, so you're looking more like a boy. Why does that make you non-binary? Like...
That's the in-baked sexism because
it is.
Neutral.
The girl is the thing. Like the girl is like the non-human sort of thing. And the real thing, the thing that you want to be is the male.
Got it. Non-binary, and I was saying this to someone yesterday, I think annoys me more because it's insulting, because it suggests that the rest of us
are binary.
Yeah. So I'm just man. And I keep saying this to people. I feel quite feminine. If you know, do I seem quite, in some ways...
You're a bit metrosexual, all right.
Well, I don't do all the vanity stuff. I don't do all that.
Do you really not like exfoliate on that?
No.
Very nice skin.
I don't do any of that. And if I give off that impression, I'm gutted to know that I give that impression off. But so none of that at all. In fact, I'm quite lazy with any of that stuff.
Oh, you're lucky then.
My idea of like the man I want to be, and I keep saying this, and I'm sorry for listeners who are bored of hearing me say it, because I'm complaining. I go to the David Lloyd because I play tennis, and I hate the men's changing room because of the snorting and the oafishness and the horrible noises coming out of the shower and all of these things. And I even now say, I've stopped it now, because for a while, when they made those noises, all these horrible things, and I won't go on to...
I don't want to know anything about this. Yeah. This is all a closed book to me, fortunately.
I'll continue then.
Yeah.
But, and I started going like that, to sort of show these people I can't have it, because I don't want to... I'm trying to enjoy a nice shower here. But I realised the noises I was making might have sounded even like sort of sexual noises. So I've stopped doing that now, and there's just nothing I can do. And but my point is that this non-binary
that you don't
sort of
identify as a man and do all the man things. Yeah.
I could do. And then I go and play football, and I love that.
But it's worse. It's worse when they put this on women. Like, I mean, because if I identify with the social role of woman or whatever the hell, like I actively choose to inhabit the role of woman because I'm not non-binary and I'm cis or whatever, then that means basically that I'm identifying with being oppressed. And I mean, I'm not trying to say like that women's lives are terrible in this country or that we're, constantly oppressed or whatever. But the fact is, the sexes are not equal in status still. Like we're getting there. Well, we were until this latest madness.
Yeah.
But so I'm meant to be actively happy about being treated as a sex object, or as the with contempt, actually, as older women do tend to be. Like men get wiser, women get disposable. Like there's
not
a lot.
You. People get you on the podcast and want to speak to you.
But I mean, the insults that are aimed at me are not the insults that will be aimed at a 55-year-old man with my level of grooming and my level of looks and my level of clothes, which are just whatever level you think I have. I just, I get the, you're a frump, you're only jealous of trans women because they're better looking than you. This
hang on,
bullshit.
I get that as well. And that was what I was going to ask you. I actually got this written. I was going to ask about. It's a really intriguing thing since I started. I wasn't really talking about the gender thing before. I mostly talked about cults, and it so happens I consider this part of that, and that got me in a lot of trouble.
Cult, yeah.
Yeah, it got me in trouble for saying it, and a lot of people didn't like that, which is the sign of a cult because they excommunicated me in that sense. Yeah. I'm amazed by the percentage of insults aimed, you're right, mostly at women, but also at me and anyone who questions that focus on our looks. And I'm just like, isn't the whole point that you're supposed to be this like really nice, progressive person who doesn't care about looks? I was talking with an interviewee and about this, and the comments were just like, two guys with stupid faces who look like they're older than they are, or mad things. And I thought, and it was a trans person who was all smiley in their photos and things. I would never go at you about your looks.
I know, it's bizarre, isn't it? I mean, the internet can be a bit like that, of course. Like if it's an anonymous person, people say things.
It's always looks with them, and I think it's their.
Oh well, I mean, I'm genocidal and anti-Semitic, so it's not always looks.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
The anti-Semitic stuff that came from you pointing out something which I think is established, which is that there is a lot of money coming in, and it so happens that 2 of the 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, but I didn't even really point that out exactly. What I said was this was top down. It's not a grassroots movement. It's an AstroTurf movement.
Okay.
And I mean, that I think is very easy to establish.
Okay.
And in a short section of my book, I mention 3 of the billionaires who have put money into this. It didn't occur to me to think about their religion, because why on earth would it? I mean, obviously I know that George Soros is Jewish, but I mean, it didn't occur to me as I flew past saying Open Society Foundations puts a fair bit of money into this. I'm actually not even sure it's Soros, because I don't think he does much in the direction of the sort of social things that the OSF funds. He cares about democracy. and he cares about Orban, and he cares about Trump, Anyway, so he was one of them. Obviously, I knew he was Jewish. It didn't occur to me, and I wouldn't have been able to tell you what the other two were. And one of them isn't Jewish anyway.
Right.
But what my critics said was that I had picked 3 Jewish billionaires. So then somebody, not me, looked into it and said, well, one of them isn't Jewish. And they said, aha, he sounded Jewish, so she thought he was Jewish.
Oh.
And I also think, like, the chain of reasoning that goes, she says rich people are funding this, she means the Jews, is an incredibly anti-Semitic chain of reasoning. Like, why would I mean that?
No. Again, it's that thing of, because some people do that, there are people, and that's not fair on you.
No, I know, but it wouldn't even come into my head. Like, I just mean, like, for your mind to go that way even, like, you're the one who's thinking about conspiracy theories about Jews, not me. I mean, one of the nice things that came out of that is that an Orthodox rabbi got in touch with me when he saw this, and he spends his days, this is about 2 years ago, this is shortly after my book came out, and he spends his days obviously battling anti-Semitism, and we're still now very good friends. So, and like, to have an Orthodox rabbi who sends me little messages whenever he sees it kicking off, saying, he once sent me a message saying, I know many anti-Semites and you're my favourite. And I just think that to myself every time it starts again.
Oh, man. Although, what's his community up to? Because I'm Jewish myself, so I can say that. But some of the Orthodox parts, there's a lot of bad stuff happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think about it. I'm actually very uninterested in religion.
Yeah. Well, but that's an interesting thing, though, because the culture war of 20 years ago did tend to be the sort of atheist, the new atheists, Hitchens, Dawkins, versus the religious right, it seemed to be.
Yeah.
And now there's been like an alliance. I was more of a Dawkinsy person. I imagine you were.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of alliance with the Jordan Petersons and the Ben Shapiros of this world.
Oh, well, I don't like, I mean, I'm keener on Jordan than I am on Ben, but well, I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, do you know
Jewish.
what? Many, many, many things have realigned in ways that I think are very salutary. And certainly I find it salutary for me. Like, I think I thought, a bunch of very superficial and easy and glib things about progress and what was bad and what was good. And, it's been very good for me to have to think again about people who are socially conservative or, to take other people's beliefs much more seriously than I used to, or to work as a sort of single issue way with people. So, for example, I really have got very little in common with the worldview of an evangelical Christian. And in particular, like, I really am a hardline atheist. Yeah. But in particular, I have a gay son. And so I really find, I find it hard to think that there are people who, if he had been born into their family, their freedom of belief means that he's going to grow up thinking there's something wrong with him. Yeah. Because I'm absolutely certain that in at least some cases, gay is baked in. Gay and straight are as baked in as male and female.
I think so.
I don't feel I know enough about the subject to say always by any means, but I'm really very certain that there is no version of my son who is straight.
Which order was your son?
He's the younger one, and I know that there's a connection, but I mean, it's not a very strong one.
Dr. James Cantor sort of talks about that. But.
Yeah, I mean, it's every. I mean, I have 5 brothers, and they're all straight, so that one didn't work there.
Yeah.
Yes, but on the other hand, I now know a bunch of evangelical Christians through this, and I think that evangelical Christians are going to be very important in the legal fight back against gender self-ID, because there's this strange thing where the whole thing, it's so crazy and it's so everywhere that it comes into many, many people's professional lives. Like, if you're a nurse or a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer or whatever, you're going to come up against this. Or just in your office, the EDI people are going to be telling you that the men have to be allowed to go into the women's toilets if they identify as women or whatever. You're going to come up against it. And most people have the common sense to think, this could blow up my life. I'll let someone else sort it out. So who doesn't do that? Basically someone who thinks their immortal soul is on the line. So, and a few people like me who for whatever reason got in too deep before realising that this is really, really toxic and it's going to change your entire life. So the evangelical Christians are the people who are going to say enough is enough in ways that are incredibly helpful to protect all of us, all of our freedom of speech, all of our freedom of belief. And I think they're learning a lot too. Because, like, I have to say when I'm talking to people like this, listen, you're wrong on gay. You're really wrong. I respect your freedom of belief, but you're wrong on that. And this is why I think this. So they're listening to people outside their bubble too.
it's a weird, I'm imagining us like I'm an alien looking down at various different tribes of people, and there's like the new atheists and the
creationists, or
the creationists, hating each other. They're forming a bond, because of their mutual dislike of the other one, which is the woke culture, which is a religious thing in itself.
Yeah.
And then in 20 years, the woke will come with the others.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's going to be anything like this realignment necessarily in another 20 years. This is a real generation-defining realignment. You know, I mean, it is not an exaggeration to say that, you know, the liberal order and evidence-based policy making and liberalism in general is under attack. And that's something that has held, obviously with threats and going through wars and so on, but like for way over a century. And we're going through a big realignment now. Those of us who care about the liberal order, care about evidence-based policy making, care about things like that human rights are universal, as opposed to being things that attach to identitarian type tribes. Well, we all of us have to come together and fight together. And of course, those people can be found in all sorts of places. They're conservatives, they're progressives, they're religious, non-religious, gay, straight. It's hard to predict how seriously someone takes this threat from other things that they do or believe, except of course for fighting against liberalism. you know,
it's so complicated. And then how would you even be able to strawman the trans activist argument?
I mean, there's so many different arguments and they're so inconsistent that it's very difficult. I mean, the thing that young people say the most when they're talking to me, if they're nice, like every now, like mostly they don't talk to me if they believe this stuff. Loads of young people do not believe this stuff, by the way. Loads of them. I hear a lot from people saying, thank you for doing what you're doing. All my friends are in this bullshit. You know, I can't say a word because I'll be completely cut off. But anyway, so young people who are in this, if they do talk to me and, you know, try to gently re-educate me, what they tend to think I want is a return to very rigid gendered social roles.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is completely absurd. Like, I'm of the generation of women who smashed those down and benefited from the work of my foremothers.
Yeah, the Judith
You know,
Butlers.
I have the PhD in bloody mathematics. I became our breadwinner. We went out to Brazil when I was a foreign correspondent. My husband followed me as the dependent spouse and looked after the kids. You know, so I've lived this very, very, very ungendered life. But they think, it's as if they can't even hear what I'm saying, and they can't hear what they're saying themselves either. Like, they're the ones who are trying to put people back into boxes. They think that if I describe myself as doing what I suppose could be called living as a man, despite having had the babies, that I should then be a man or something.
Yeah. There's something wrong with your body.
Yeah, I was born in the wrong body, wanting to be this person who's in charge. And it's hard to get them to hear it because they're so sure that they think, they're so sure that they know what I think, and they're so 180 degrees wrong. And also they shift ground. Like, whenever you say that, they'll say, oh no, it's not about social roles, it's about an innate gendered feeling. Well, what innate gendered feeling? Like, how would you judge your innate gendered feeling and know that that was the sort of gendered feeling that meant man or woman without looking at the social roles and the stereotypes? Oh, no, it's ineffable. It's like, this makes no sense.
It doesn't actually make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. So it's not like creationism where I know what it is they're saying. I think it's false.
That's an interesting difference, yeah. I think I know what they mean. There was God, 6,000 years, la-di-da. I don't think there's any evidence for that, but if people want to believe that, that's fine. Yeah. I respect that. This is, I am a woman. Okay, what does that mean? Please tell me. Well, I'm an adult human female.
I did a debate some weeks ago at the Institute for Economic Affairs in London. It was an absolutely bizarre thing, and I invite your listeners to go and look it up. It's on YouTube. Yeah. So Peter Tatchell and a trans woman called Frida Wallace were the other people. Like, it was a debate, really. It was very unusual in this. And I and this guy, Mark Glendenning, who's at the IEA, were, you know, that this is all a threat to liberal values and so on. And Peter and Frida were on the other side. And I mean, I'm going to call Frida he, him because I don't do preferred pronouns.
Okay.
Frida turned up. So this is a man.
Okay.
In basically fetish gear. And you know, fishnet tights that were really ripped at the groin, and then sat kind of displaying his groin to the audience, which was mostly women, and talked about how you know, he was going to the Orchard Garden Fetish Club this weekend, and he'd be f***ing TERFs husbands, and, you know, just absolutely disgusting display of male sexual aggression and entitlement. You know, he insulted my looks. He drank us all the way through it. He was really drunk. Peter Tatchell tried to stop him drinking. That was hilarious. And the whole thing, like, and Peter said that, you know, he gave this absolutely extraordinary definition of what it is to have a gender identity, and that everyone has a gender identity. And people in the audience were saying, I don't. And he was saying, you do. I can tell all your gender identities by the way you dress.
Wow.
I know. So I thought, like, I wish I'd said this. I only thought of it afterwards. Like, what about what Frida is wearing and saying and doing makes you think that this is a woman? Like, it's a man who's dressing as a woman for sexual thrills and in order to, as a display of dominance over the women in the audience. Like, it's such a male thing to do. Like, this is a person living as a man. Like, a minority man, a minority way of living as a man, but I mean, absolutely as a man.
Yeah, I personally, I rarely do that, but I mean...
but women really don't.
So there is an autism link.
Yeah, there is.
There is a sort of social contagion suggestion, and there is something I didn't know about until I saw on Helen Pluckrose's Twitter. AGP. GP.
Yeah, so
is this what this is?
Yeah, it stands for autogynephilia. I don't want to diagnose Frida Wallace. I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So, setting Frida aside, it is a relatively common male sexual fetish to get a thrill out of cross-dressing. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a while ago, but there was a study in Sweden which was anonymised and which seems to be about the best estimate, 3% of men erotically cross-dress to masturbate.
3%?
3%, yeah. I bet you it's more, actually. But... those men, whether they remain in, you know, accepting that they're men and they keep the cross-dressing in the bedroom for the weekend or the, you know, cross-dressing clubs or whatever, or whether they bring their fetish out of the closet and go out dressed as women and find that thrilling, that depends on the society they're in. So, you know, there's parts of the world where obviously men don't go around dressed as women because they'd get gay bashed, or, you know, women don't have rights as they wouldn't want to identify as women. Mm-hmm. But here, of course, you're going to be stunning and brave. So men who are sexual fetishists and cross-dressers for erotic purposes will largely identify now as trans women.
What's really sad is a lot of gay people fought really hard for rights.
Yeah.
It's very serious rights. And okay, you can have fun while doing it sometimes if you want to celebrate. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've heard a lot of gay people today saying, you know, the way that it's morphed into this queer/LGBT thing, and people are just dressing incredibly sexually. I went to a gay rights, what's Pride in Berlin, and I looked down and...
It's public sex.
It's just a guy giving another guy a blowjob.
Yeah.
That's not something I've seen before. It's not something I'm comfortable seeing. I'm certainly not comfortable with kids around me seeing that.
Yeah, I know.
That's just going on. And it's amazing they're able to get away with it, pretending it's anything to do with the rights of gay people who are looking at this going, why have you done this in my name?
Why are all the fetishists out? Why are it's turned into a display of male sexual license.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, straight men would enjoy a lot of sexual license if they were allowed to do it as well. But it's nothing to do with being gay or straight. It's to do with being male.
But
that's not a very female thing to do.
No,
it's a male thing to do. But you're not allowed to do it if you're straight. You're allowed to do it if you're gay. It's under cover of you know, the rainbow flag.
And it's so unfair to gay people. Most gay people.
Yeah, most gay people, like most straight people, don't particularly want to smash social norms. They want, you know, to be upstanding members of society who, by the way, and this is relevant only to their sexual partners, are interested in same-sex ones rather than opposite sex. I mean, I don't know, Pete Buttigieg is the classic example of a gay man who seems to be very uninterested in gay as an identity. He just wishes to live with his husband rather than a potential wife, that's all. And there was this remarkable article in the LA Review of Books some years ago. I think it was in the LA Review of Books, pretty sure it was. And they put him on the cover looking very square, standing in front of a very square sort of looking house. And it was heterosexuality without women. So I know it's heterosexuality as a style, as a sort of a life, you know.
So offensive again to gay people.
Hugely offensive. I mean, it means that you can be straight. Like, have you ever heard this expression, spicy straight? No. So spicy straights are people who are straight but queer.
Okay.
So, you know, you're a woman who only sleeps with men. You might have kissed a girl and you liked it possibly, but, you know, you dye your hair blue and you call yourself pansexual.
Yeah.
So that's a spicy straight. So LGBT groups now are basically becoming inundated with straight people who don't want to be straight because straight's boring.
Oh my God.
And so they're in there, you know. I mean, somebody I know was talking to me about her non-binary identifying daughter recently and mentioned, you know, my daughter who's part of, I didn't say daughter obviously, but I'm going to, you know, who's a member of the LGBTQIA++ community. I just thought, like, is my gay son in that community? I don't think so. Because what have they got in common? She's a straight girl and he's a gay boy. And the things they have in common aren't about sexuality.
It's become a symbol, LGBTQI, of like, I'm part of this quasi-religious.
I'm not boring. It's what it means. I'm not boring. I'm not
ironically,
basic. It's very boring.
I mean, I can't think of anything more boring to be part of.
Oh my God, I know. And it's got that very teenage vibe of it, like, you know, everybody's a rebel in exactly the same way.
Yes, man. What I still think is that people are going to be listening, and I always get these sort of questions. Why not just be kind?
Yeah.
What is, and I know that we've covered many of these, but what is like the main thing that you're saying? This is why this is really dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually what I spend my days doing now with Sex Matters. So the short version is 4 words: other people have rights. So there's a stupid thing that they say in this movement, which is rights are not a pie. Or like, what does it mean to you? Like, a pie is something you divide up and then one person gets more, another person gets less. Rights really are a pie in many cases. So, you know, one person's freedom of speech is another person's infringement of privacy. One person's privacy is another person's infringement of freedom of speech. Those are 2 human rights that collide. And often you have to weigh them up against each other. So every time a celebrity goes to court to stop the publication of paparazzi pictures, they are infringing on the freedom of speech of the press. And if they lose, the press is infringing on their privacy. Yeah. So that's just an example of how it is not true that human rights are not pie. Human rights are often pie, right? And some human rights depend on being able to recognise the sex of the people around you, in particular women's privacy rights, women's safety, women's ability to recover from trauma, especially sexual trauma. Those things rely on women being able to recognise who is male and who is female and to act on that recognition. So if you are a woman who has been raped and you wish to go to a place where you can recover, and that will mean for you to be entirely male-free space, and a man says, what is it to you if I identify as a woman? It's everything to you. It's going to ruin your male-free space. And that's like a really sort of big example of it, like a really pointed example of it. But just in everyday situations, women are not safe undressing in places where men have free access. And like, you know, you told me things I didn't know about men's changing rooms, and I now wish I hadn't known them.
How do you not know that? They make all these horrible noises, unseemly noises.
No, I didn't know that.
I just thought it was obvious about...
No, I mean, I know that men wee on the seats because I have to go into toilets after them, but I've never used a changing room that I've shared with men.
Seats? I mean, what about sinks?
I know that. I know that because I've got brothers who played sport and travelled and, you know, complained about, you know, drunk roommates coming back in and using the sink. Yeah. Disgusting. Anyway, you disgusting human beings. Sorry, you're not. You're lovely. I've got sons and brothers that are all lovely people.
No, but you're right. And I know you're thinking, some people go, not all men and that thing.
Yeah, I know.
But I would say to those men, first, I can't stand the other side, men who are like the man is like, oh, you men are all horrible and I'm nice. But I would say to those men, if you had to leave your daughter or girlfriend or wife or whoever it is in a room with a stranger and you don't know who it is, would you rather it be a woman or a man? Yeah. And if you don't want it to be with a man, why is that? Yeah. It doesn't mean that we're all bad. Most men are lovely. It's
not a character reference to men to say I don't want them in my changing room.
Yeah.
I don't want my son in my changing room either. Like, you know, he's a grown-up. He'd be embarrassing. Yeah. And I understand that there are cultures like Finland where that's not the case, where families do sauna naked together. I'm not Finnish.
No.
And my boundaries are my boundaries. So for women to be able to have boundaries, which is absolutely essential for women to live as full human beings with full autonomy, you know, to be able to take full part in public life, women need to be able to say, you're male, you're not welcome in here. And if that male person says, what's it to you? I say, well, it's my rights. It's my right to privacy. It's my right to dignity. It's my safety. And on occasion, it's even more than that. Like, if you think about, like, the most extreme examples are medical examination. Yeah. So there was this extraordinary episode a year or two ago in Scotland where a bill was put forward to enable women who were reporting rape and we had to have a forensics exam. So this was going to mean a vaginal exam, an uncomfortable vaginal exam, possibly an anal exam as well. Putting fingers inside you, that woman could request a forensics a specialist who was female. And the Scottish government opposed an amendment to say really female, not identifying as female, but really female. And this turned into a big debate in Holyrood, and in fact the amendment passed. But anyone who voted against it or argued against it was literally arguing that a raped woman should be forced to accept a man putting his fingers in her vagina, right? And she isn't allowed to say that that is what has happened. That if she says, no, you're a man, she will either not get care, not be able to have any chance of a prosecution, not be able to check for internal injuries or anything like that, or she'll be called a bigot, right? Mm. That's actually an Article 3 violation in human rights terms. Article 3 is the prohibition on torture or inhuman degrading treatment. So, that's when the rubber really hits the road, when a man who says he's a woman thinks that gives him the right to do an internal examination of a raped woman.
In the name of progressive.
In the name of progressive values. So whenever I say these things, people say, oh, you're picking the most extreme examples.
Yes.
And that is correct. But, as a mathematician, that's what you do. You look for the reductio ad absurdum, as it's called. You say, start with these premises. The premise is that what makes you a man or a woman is what you say you are. And then follow that chain of reasoning to its logical conclusion. Well, if men and women are groups that are self-defined, then you will have rapists in women's jails. You will have men winning women's sports prizes. And you will have, sure as eggs, you will have men who think it's their right to put their fingers in a woman's vagina. And she has no right to even say that's what's happening. That is just logic. You just unfold it. So I get to that point and I say, that's the reductio ad absurdum that shows me the premise was false. That's the way that a proof by contradiction works in mathematics. Start with your premise, work forward the logic, get to a point that's absurd, like in maths it's a contradiction, and then say, right, the starting premises were false.
Well, also, the same point, I think, but we have laws to protect us from the extremes.
Yes, that's correct.
People get offended, and I understand they're offended because, you think we're all going to be like that? No, I don't think so. I think a very, very small minority, just like probably the same number of men, I don't know, who might take advantage of things like that. We don't need laws for average Joe Bloggs attacking you because he's not going to attack you.
And then the other thing they often say is, we don't take rights away from entire groups on the basis of the behaviour of minority. Well, actually, we do. Mm. And we do in any situation where there's safeguarding. So when people say that, I know they know nothing about safeguarding. Like actually, Peter Tatchell said this again and again in that IEA debate. And, it was so annoying. There were 5 people on the panel, including the chair. And everything he said, I wanted to just say, Peter, let me stop you right there. You don't know what you're talking about. And many points flew by. But anyway, again and again, he said this, you can't take rights away from all trans people because of the behaviour of minority. Well, think about school and safeguarding. You are not allowed to go into a school at all without going through the police checks. Schools have hard, bright lines like no adult on their own ever with a child unless the door is open. None. Not one. No male teachers go into the female spaces ever. Not one. Because as soon as you allow any loophole, well, who uses it? The pedophiles, the rapists, the groomers, whatever. So we actually do have hard, bright line rules in situations where failure is catastrophic. So when I say I don't want any men in women's spaces, no matter how those men identify, I'm not saying all men are rapists. I'm not saying, all men who identify as women are rapists. I'm just saying, I'm saying 2 things. One is I don't want them there because I'd be embarrassed. It's uncomfortable, right. And that's my right. But I'm also saying if I allow some of them in, guess what? The ones who want to do it are disproportionately the specific ones it's worst.
Those are the ones doing it, yeah.
So any man who oversteps women's boundaries by coming into women's spaces has already demonstrated he doesn't care about women's boundaries. He's exactly the worst sort of man to be in there.
I tell you what, as well in men's changing rooms, there is a kind of guy, loads of these men who they'll just be like drying their hair and they'll have their like genitalia
out,
like, right in front, and they're just saying, I saw you're playing tennis, like I'm sitting down.
There's women like that too, actually.
I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like, I should not be this close to your appendage.
People vary so much on that. Like I spend all my days, I spend so much more of my days talking about, things that I just was able to ignore when I was the finance editor of The Economist, by the way, when I read my book. Like I still think, when I was talking about, banking regulation, I did a special report on digital banking on consumers and travelled to China and to Korea and Singapore for it while I was thinking about these issues. So bizarre, real whiplash. But yeah, I mean, I think back to the changing rooms in the building where the Economist was and still is. And like, there's really people who just do that. They wander around completely naked, women who wander around completely naked and they're drying their hair and they're chatting to you. And there's other people who like get entirely dressed in the shower cubicle.
Yeah.
So yeah, people are really varied, but people are entitled to their own boundaries.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. People keep saying to me, why don't you have someone from the other side on? I'm finding that almost impossible.
Yeah.
So, and I think you are as well. What's going on?
I mean, I'd like to say they know their arguments are idiotic, but I don't think that's true, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, Peter Tatchell just keeps saying the same things. And I mean, I've literally debunked them, as in chapter and verse debunked some of them. And I still hear him 2 weeks later saying them again. So it's not stopping him. And I mean, I'll give Peter one thing. He was willing to turn up and talk.
Yeah.
So good for him. Yeah. Why? Like, I think for a lot of the people who identify as trans, like the ones for whom this is really important, it falls into the category of things that you can't really explain. It's a feeling. Like I've said, and I stand by my statement that, you know, no man can feel like a woman. Whatever it is he's feeling is a man's feeling. But to them, it feels like a religious people feeling the direct presence of God. And that's just not something that you can debate. Like, religious people don't debate that either. They may debate other things, but they wouldn't enter into head-to-head with you on the ineffable feeling that there is a God. Like, where the debate is that I say that doesn't mean that God's real. That's just a feeling you have. And so a trans-identified person who feels like, really, I know I am a woman, whatever that means, or I know I am a man, and I say, I hear you, just doesn't mean anything to me. Doesn't make you a woman, or doesn't make you a man. Like, what more is there to say?
Yeah.
Like, this is just not the sort of thing that can be an argument. All we can do in the end is say, we have freedom of belief in this country.
Yeah.
You believe what you believe. I believe what I believe. And don't you try and make me believe your belief. Like, I can see that you're a man. You tell me you're a woman and I'm like, yeah, whatevs, think what you like, but don't come into women's spaces because you're not. Like, as long as we get to that point. And then the other reason is, I think, because, of course, around trans-identified people, there's this enormous and much larger group of people for whom this is the social justice movement of our times.
Yeah.
And for those people, unfortunately, there's a narrative that just was not the case in social justice activism 20 years ago, that even to debate, you don't debate people's rights. And you're like, seriously, we don't debate people's rights? Like, look back at the history of ending slavery. They did nothing but debate it.
If somebody said to me, there's a debate now whether Jews should be killed.
Yeah, that's the one they use,
Although, did you see that video the other day?
I know.
Of the Penn State and Harvard presidents?
Yeah.
And they're being asked very clearly, is genocide, saying genocide against Jews, is that against your terms of service? And we know that they would say it's against terms of service to misgender someone.
Yeah.
100%. Genocide against Jews, and one after another just, well, it depends on the context.
I know, amazing, isn't it? Like, we are upside down world. We are such upside down world. But like, if you want to take people's rights away or gain rights that are not there in law, you're going to have to do the work. So at the moment in this country, it is the law that there are two sexes and that that's really biological and that people can't change sex except in certain limited legal situations, and you've got to go through a big process, and only 6,000 people have ever done that. That's the law.
Yeah.
If you want to change that, you have to do the work. And I'm totally entitled to say I think that the law shouldn't change. I mean, that's the way it was with gay marriage. Like, the law was it had to be a man or a woman, and if you wanted to change that, you had to do the work. And people did the work. My God, they set up charities, they argued, they debated, they, demonstrated how, gay men during the AIDS crisis weren't able to act as next of kin for their much loved partners who ended up being shut out of hospital rooms. They demonstrated it, they debated it, and they won. And now the narrative is that you should just go, it's my right.
It's mad.
And I mean, if it was the other way around, that the law was that there's no such thing as sex, or that for some reason we've decided to have these two categories called male and female, but everyone just says which they are. Like, why the hell would we do that, by the way? But anyway, if that was the law, then it would be on me to have to debate.
Oh yeah, and we would.
But instead we've got this mad situation where, I, the person who is defending the law, material reality and public opinion, I'm the one who's having to do all the work.
Well, we're pleased that you do. I've got one more question for you, but first tell us where you want people to go and see your stuff.
All right. So I have a website, thehelenjoyce.com. Somebody else got helenjoyce.com first, obviously. And I'm on Twitter more than I should be because I tend to use Twitter as the punctuation between writing paragraphs and such like. And that is H Joyce Gender. Those are the two places to find me. Oh, and I have a column in The Critic.
Okay. We will put a link below. I want to ask you, who is a heretic that you admire?
God.
Yeah, I should ask people beforehand.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to be sycophantic and say the woman that I work with at Sex Matters.
Sycophant.
Maya Forstatter. So, I mean, we actually had our Christmas party last night, the day before recording this, and I had to say some words about Maya. And the thing is, she's somebody who went through a precedent-setting legal case. So she was kicked out of the Centre for, Centre for Development Studies, CGD, Centre for Global Development, that's it, an American think tank that has an arm in London. And in 2018, when the government was considering introducing self-ID, so the policy that you just said which sex you were yourself, she said in work that she thought that was a bad idea and why. And she ended up being unlawfully dismissed. And so she went to court, she lost in the employment tribunal, she won in the higher... If you don't know about this, it's mad reading. The original judgment said that it was akin to Nazism to believe that there are two sexes and you can't change your sex. Oof. It was not worthy of respect in a democratic society. So she went to the appeal tribunal and that was overturned in its entirety, and that set a precedent. So it is now illegal to discriminate in employment or the provision of goods or services on the basis of somebody thinking that there are two sexes, that matters.
It continues to happen.
So she did that. It does continue to happen. So she did that, and it took her 5 years. But what's interesting about that bit of heresy on her part is that, I now know a lot about what it takes to do a big legal case, and really almost nobody can do it, because either you're sane, in which case you don't put yourself through this, you just apologise at work and stop talking, or you're nuts, so you don't do that, but then you make an absolutely dreadful witness and you can't stand the pressure of 5 years of being called a bigot and going through and being cross-examined and so on. And every now and then you find somebody who's got the right sort of crazy to insist on it and the right sort of sane to do it well, and Maya's that person. So she's just this incredibly phlegmatic person who just, nothing seems to bother her, but she still deeply cares, which is an unusual combination.
We'll have to get on the podcast.
Very impressive.
I have to get on the podcast.
Yeah, you should do.
Yeah. Click the links below, check out Helen's cool stuff, and keep watching the podcast. I'm going to put something related to this gender critical stuff, maybe Graham Linehan. It might not be, who knows what's above my finger now, but just click on the thing and keep on watching.